All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Bailey Albert. I am the Communications Fellow here at the Virginia Sea Grant and also the Assistant Manager for the Aquaculture Information Exchange. For those of you who are not familiar, the Aquaculture Information Exchange, or AIE, as we call it, is a NOAA and USDA-backed online platform for the American aquaculture community. It's a place for aquaculture-related job postings, courses, resources, and more. And it's free to register. So if anyone on this webinar has not registered yet, I'm going to put a link in the chat for you all to register. Also, this webinar will be available on the Aquaculture Information Exchange YouTube channel. So please make sure to subscribe to that so you don't miss a webinar. That's where all of our webinars will be housed. So I'm going to put a link in the chat for that as well. And now, with all of that housekeeping out of the way, it's time for me to introduce our guest speakers for today, which we're so grateful to have them on the AIE webinar series. Our guest speakers will be talking about monitoring technology for kelp aquaculture. So first we have Larissa Zip from Blue Robotics. We have Robert Jarrett from the Darling Marine Center at the University of Maine. And then we have Adam St. Gelais from Aquaculture Research Institute at the University of Maine. So without further ado, all three of you can take it away.
Thanks so much, Bailey. And thank you everyone for joining us. I'm Larissa. I work for Blue Robotics in their Blue Economy channel building role. So I have the pleasure of working with really smart and diverse individuals across the entire spectrum of the Blue Economy to learn and enhance the work that they're doing with technology. So I'll just chat for a couple of minutes about who we are as a company and our role in this project, and then hand it off to Robert and Adam to go through the nitty gritty of their findings. Adam, do you want to go to the next slide?
Maybe. You seem to be frozen.
Uh-oh. Well,
there we go.
Well, okay, there we go. So just to give you a little bit of a background on Blue Robotics and what we do, we were founded with the intention of making blue technology accessible to a whole range of users by making it accessible and affordable. So we make both components like marine sensors, enclosures, a whole range of hardware to facilitate underwater exploration, as well as systems like the ROV and the Blue Boat, which are those two pictured at the bottom, that allow researchers, inspectors, ocean enthusiasts to explore and enhance their understanding of the underwater world. In our values as a company, we're really focused on supporting sustainable practices in the blue economy. So we have several strategic initiatives that allow us to partner with people that are trying to have a positive impact in the blue economy. One of these initiatives is our Grow Line initiative. Adam, if you want to go to the next slide. So that is working with a range of partners in the regenerative aquaculture space. Right now, we work with Ocean Rainforest, and these guys at Darling Marine Center have a little bit of work going on with Cascadia up in Canada, where I'm based. But we really like the ethos of this ecosystem and how important it is in the overall functionality for ocean health. We see a role for Blue Robotics in bringing our products to the table in order to sort of enhance the reach, scale, and capabilities that farmers can have on their kelp tenements. And so we have partnered with the Darling Marine Center to, as the technology partner, to bring our Blue Boat as a platform along with the ROV to gather data and collect important information in sort of the monitoring phases. Adam, if you want to go to the next slide. And so with that, we manufacture a range of cameras, of sensors, so that you can measure sort of water quality and other facets that are required for good decision making. We have acoustic monitoring technology, sonars for mapping the seafloor, monitoring biomass, and detecting objects like lines or lost gear. And all of this can be used to make decisions more quickly and from remote areas, as well as having a huge availability of data that before was not really available. Next slide. So this is the piece of Blue Robotics technology that Adam and Robert were using for their surveys. And Robert will speak a little bit more to the practical implementation of its use. But this is our Blue Boat, which is an autonomous surface vessel. We kind of like to think of it as a surface tractor. So it can move across great distances on the water. It's a platform where you can affix different sort of modular components like the sensors or cameras, lights, a whole range of sonar technology. So it's really purpose built for the problems and data that you're trying to collect. Can be used everything from surveying and mapping in the pre sort of permitting stage to patrols. People have 3D printed different attachments in order to perform certain functionalities that are valuable to their farm. And then in this project, its main role was as a way to collect sonar data in order to measure kelp growth and biomass over time. So with that, I'll hand it off to Adam to kind of talk more about its application to that project. Adam, take it away.
Thanks, Larissa. Hi, everybody. My name's Adam St. Gelais. I work as an aquaculture innovation specialist with the Aquaculture Research Institute at the University of Maine. And I'm going to talk a little bit, I think I'm going to lead off with kind of an overview of where we are in Maine, because I know our audience is beyond New England, to give everyone a sense of who we are and what we do. Then a sort of broad, holistic interview to the entire nature of our seaweed research program, because those are really the things that underpin the work that we've done at this offshore test site, where we've been able to utilize some affordable technology in hopes of decreasing operational costs for larger scale seaweed farms that are further from shore. Keyboard's not working. So, like I said, I'm at the University of Maine. It's the flagship research university for the state, and I'm based at the Aquaculture Research Institute, which is a university-wide research institute whose mission is sort of to stitch together all of the disparate expertise that we have at the university that pertains to aquaculture, since aquaculture has so many broad and varied applications and ways to address problems. So we strive to be sort of a place where the meeting of the minds can come together and break people out of their silos to address problems that otherwise maybe people in certain disciplines wouldn't think about. So as part of the University of Maine, we get to operate at some of the nation's really great state-of-the-art aquaculture facilities. And they're nicely spread geographically around our state, which is important as we've got something like 3,500 miles of coastline squished into 300 miles as the crow flies. And Robert and I are based where that little circle is there at the Darling Marine Center, which is University of Maine's Mid-Coast Remote Marine Center. We're celebrating 60 years this year. So there's been a really great legacy of important work that has come out of this facility, and just really great to be able to be here and continue that legacy. So this is but a fraction of our team that work towards the seaweed stuff. On the top row is all the University of Maine people. A couple people are missing here, some new graduate students that have started, so our team is growing. And we also work broadly with a lot of partners, in particular Dan Gossard and Scott Lindell at Woods Hole, and Toby and Zach down at Kelson Marine Company in Portland, who do a lot of our engineering work and modeling work for us. So broadly, our seaweed aquaculture research program aims to address constraints to resilience and growth within Maine's seaweed farming sector, holistically from nursery through harvest. So I'll talk really briefly about some of the other initiatives that we're working on, namely biobanking, community nurseries, and technoeconomics before we move on to the experimental farm, I think, because these are critical to understand as rationales for things that are needed when we move offshore. So our ethos is flask to farm research, right? So we have a nursery facility, a community facility, and also inshore and offshore test farms. So this allows us to conduct dedicated research from flask to farm. So we can take community from within the lab, we can create our own crosses, we can create our own seed, we can assess methods for outplanting, we can do strain development. So it's sort of a full suite of capabilities, which is really great to have. So Maine seaweed. So for those who don't know, Maine, at least until very recently, led the nation in seaweed production. We may be getting close to parity with Alaska at this point, I'm not sure. But as you can see, a lot of our farms represented here by all the dots inshore. This is out of date, there are more of them now. But they're all very close to shore. They're either up inside of estuaries, tucked inside the lee of islands. And those are some of our most busy areas that we have in terms of other stakeholders and user groups within the state. But there's a lot of space within state waters just outside of those areas that maybe we wouldn't define as offshore, but we can define as nearshore, but very exposed and fairly deep. This is just an idea of sort of the general state of Maine's seaweed farming industry now inside of these small areas. We're using fairly basic technology. We've adopted a lot of the methods that fishermen have already used. In fact, fishermen make up most of the seaweed farming activity that happens in the state of Maine right now. But we are sort of starting to recognize that in order to scale, we may need to move into some of these areas with slightly larger footprints and understanding what the technoeconomics looks like and what are the needs that are going to underpin that sustainable growth. And one of those things we think is going to be both biobanking and gametophyte-based nurseries. So we've started this biobanking program within the last 24 months. So what our aim here is to archive as much genetic diversity within the sugar kelp populations in the Gulf of Maine as possible as the wild populations continue to decline due to impacts from climate change and other things. So the more we can conserve that genetic diversity, the more we can either use that moving forward as a conservation tool or as a tool to develop resilient strains or high performing strains for farming. And so for right now, we have about 40 clonal isolations of Saccharina altissima. By the end of the next 24 months, we hope to be upwards of 1,000 to 2,000 clonal strains from the entire coast of Maine. We're also working on understanding how then to scale those gametophytes to have a nursery process that is underpinned in gametophytes so that we are not reliant on wild source tissue to backstop the industry every single year. We're doing that in many different ways, flask culture. We're also experimenting with bioreactor culture. So we have a fully replicated bioreactor system. So we're doing a lot of experiments here to figure out how to most efficiently and effectively scale biomass to quantities that are relevant for trying to run a gametophyte-based nursery. And a lot of the work that we've done over the past probably 3 or 4 years has been looking at the technoeconomics of what scaled offshore seaweed aquaculture could look like with a very place-based approach with a specific site in the Gulf of Maine. We started with a paper looking at the technoeconomics of nurseries, sort of that serves as a submodel to feed into these other ones, and then published our first initial holistic model that was looking at quantifying the baseline costs for producing kelp offshore in large-scale farms with an eye towards carbon dioxide removal. At the time, people were really interested in that, and I think continue to be, but we wanted to first try to answer the economic question. We felt that would probably be easier to do than some of the more difficult ones in terms of impacts to benthic communities and things like that. From those two models, we've now sort of iterated again and come up with our most comprehensive model to date. It's very detailed. It includes feedbacks, both operational and engineering. That's in review right now in algal research, but if you want a sneak preview, you can check out that QR code. So one of the things that we've learned from the latest iteration of this model is that operational costs for offshore seaweed farming probably matter more, if at least as much, if not more, than your capital expenditures. So that basically meaning the way that you structure the operations on your farm can drive as much of the cost as the components that you need to put into it. So with that in mind, we sought to look offshore in the Gulf of Maine and establish a small offshore experimental farm to try to start to answer some basic questions. One, can we even farm seaweed this far off in the Gulf of Maine? What depths can we get that seaweed to grow at? Because our techno-economic models suggest that if you can grow at a deeper depth, there are actually some expenditure savings by being able to downsize some of the components within your system by getting below the dominant wave energy, as well as understanding just what it takes to operate a farm out in an environment like this, 20 kilometers from shore and 100 meters depth. And also, it then provided us an opportunity to do some basic explorations around, what is some accessible and fairly low-cost existing technology that we might be able to deploy on a farm like this to help us be more efficient in the way that we operate these farms. Vessel operations in that techno-economic model fell out as one of the primary cost drivers to your operational costs. So when your farm is 20, 30 kilometers from shore, the fewer times you need to go out there and see it, the less diesel you have to use, the less wear and tear on your vessels, the less man hour and man time to get out there, and the more efficient you can be when you're on site is really important as well. So our offshore test site is in the Gulf of Maine. So this is that figure I showed you prior, looking at all of the existing kelp farms that are all tucked inshore. This is where the Darling Center is, where we're located in Mid-Coast Maine. And so we put a kelp farm out here. It's 2.5 miles off the island of Monhegan, which is right up there. I don't know if you guys can see my cursor or not. And as that slide before suggested, it's in 100 meters of water and is fully exposed to all of the energy in the Gulf of Maine. So we worked really closely with Kelson Marine to design a system that we felt could perform well at that site and be deployable with the systems that we had available to us at the Darling Center. It's a drag embedment anchor-based catenary mooring type system, which works really well for these small scale applications. However, when you're in 100 meters of water, you need a lot of scope. So we had a 400-foot long, 122-meter grow line, and from anchor to anchor, the farm spanned 625 meters. So clearly, from an engineering perspective, this isn't the most efficient utilization of offshore space, but it did work really well for us as a test platform. And I mentioned grow depth was one of the things we were really interested in. So if you can see sort of by that 30-foot dropper line, we seeded the line and we're growing from about 10 meters in depth up to 2 meters in depth on both sides of the farms, soft shackles. The system was held in place with 150-pound commercial dam forts and chains. So pretty much everything in the system you could buy at a marine hardware store. So this gives you an idea of what the gear looks like on the deck of the boat. This is the IRC, University of Maine's research vessel at the Darling Center. So we had to design the system in the constraints of the vessel. So we knew we could only lift 1,500 pounds with this A-frame, and then we had to build backwards from there. So the way we deployed it, we dropped the first anchor and effectively had the entire farm stitched together on the boat, painted out the stern, seeded as we went along, and then set the opposing anchor once the seed line was done. So you can see in the middle, this is the farm being seeded, and the seed line coming off on the grow line. And you can sort of see there's the energy at the site the day of our deployment. And this is about as calm as a working condition as we can expect to get in November when we deploy the farm. So this went in the water on November 20th. This is what you feel like on the right there after doing that work. You fall asleep on pretty much anything. So one of the primary questions was, can you grow kelp in the conventional way this far offshore in the Gulf of Maine? These are the first two monitoring points we were able to get to. at the farm, one of the things we learned is just accessibility is more difficult than we had anticipated. We deployed the farm in November of 2024. We were able to get back out to it in January, and then April 10th was the next time that we had a weather window available to get out to the farm and do some work. So this underpins the need, I think, to be able to utilize technology as much as possible to help with sort of the routine things that normally you would be doing to steam out to the farm and spend time on site. If you can do that using technology, it not only saves you costs, but it adds probably a safety factor as well. And this is at harvest, May 27th. It was beautiful kelp. So certainly, at least at this site off of Monhegan, is capable of supporting growing seaweed this far out in the Gulf of Maine, which is really exciting. And I mentioned we were interested in looking at how the kelp fared with grow depth. And if we look at it, we can see that as you would expect, the biomass gets lower as you get deeper in the water column. It was about 12 kilograms per meter at 2 meters depth, which is where kelp is typically grown inshore in the Gulf of Maine. But if you assume, maybe a 10% biomass decline threshold is okay, if there's lots of cost savings by lowering your farm deeper within the water column, you may be able to get down to a header rope depth of something like 5 to 6 meters, which is interesting. More interesting, blade length didn't seem to differ with depth. So the blades that were down at 10 meters were on par with the length of the blades that were at 2 meters. There were just fewer of them. So as you got down to 10 meters, you're looking at something like 50% of the blades per grow line area that you would have at the surface. So this is the reason we really wanted to come to this webinar, and that I've talked about all the other stuff that we're doing. All of this sort of begs the question, right? It's hard to get to the site. It's expensive when you're out there. Weather is unpredictable. This is a single long line. So if we extrapolate this out to a multi-long line system or sort of a gridded array system, the need to be able to understand how your farm is performing without you needing to necessarily physically be there, I think is really important. So the questions that we sought to answer here are, can we use some inexpensive equipment? In this case, we have some telemeter GPS buoys and a remotely operated surface vehicle with some side scan sonar to basically understand if your farm is staying on station, how it's performing and behaving over time, and then using the remote vehicle and the sonar to understand what the crop is actually doing on your farm. So in terms of station keeping and farm behavior over time, sort of like, is it staying where it's supposed to be? Are the buoys in the positions that they're supposed to be in? How is it moving around? Can we understand how the system is behaving and responding to the dominant ocean conditions in a simple way? And this was the solution we chose for that. These buoys are made by a company called Blue Ocean Gear. They're about the size of a cantaloupe. They're meant to be very user-friendly. They were designed initially to be deployed in commercial fishing operations on mobile gear types to be able to relocate them and understand how they were behaving. But they've been adopted by research and aquaculture platforms as well. So we bought a suite of 4 of these buoys that we could swap in and out. So we would have 2 on station at all times, and they were attached on these end dropper lines. So at the 30-foot mark there, basically, so that would give us a sense of how the long line is positioned and the sort of start and stop of the grow line. This is what their dashboard looks like. So these work off of either satellite or cell towers. Ours, I think, is working off of cell because we're close enough to Monhegan to be able to do that. And you can visualize one or all of the buoys. You can see how long they were on station for. You can visualize the positions over time. And it also gives you a limited suite of other sort of data parameters that can be pretty useful. Water temperature at the surface. We can look at dive depth. So if they get submerged, how long were they underwater? What depth did they get to? You can look at things like acceleration. So how fast buoys were moving around, which is interesting to look at. So I pulled together a quick visualization, right, of what the kind of information we can get from these simple telemeter buoys over time. These are set to report every hour. And this is starting at 320. So we're missing the sort of the first half of deployment. This is the latter half. The dots here are coded blue to red for temperature. So you can kind of get a sense from March to April. So the long line is sort of running top to bottom here. So these buoys are moving lightly over time. And we determined this was a longer distance than we expected them or wanted them to be moving. So when we were able to visit the site in April, now you can see, oops, go backwards. There. So now you can see we went out in April, April 10th, and took some biomass samples on the farm, and we took that opportunity to reposition the farm. So one of the nice things about this drag embedment anchor design is that you can use crown lines on the back of the anchors to sort of take tension off of the farm and use the boat to reset the anchors. So we repositioned the farm and we made sure both anchors were set very well. And that worked very well. The farm really started to stay on station. You can see there's a lot less wobble back and forth in the trajectories of the buoys. They're moving in a pretty straight line and over a shorter distance because we put more tension in the farm. And then that happens. So in May of 2025, we had 2 storms in the month of May that were basically very late season nor'easters. So this was a great test scenario in that we had maximum bioloading on the farm and wave and current energy coming perpendicular to the farm orientation, right, out of the northeast. So you can see all of a sudden the farm jumps to the west pretty considerably, and the way that these buoys are moving changes significantly as well. So we know that not only has the farm moved to the west considerably, but that its geometry has changed pretty drastically. And then that second storm in May pushes it farther to the west as well. You can also do things like plot submergences over time. So you can see on station, there were basically no submergences up until we started to get more biomass on the farm in early May. A couple of dots start to show up. And then as the farm loses its geometry and gets more and more kelp on it, we start to get more and more submergences off station. So, these are fairly simple tools, but I think can give you really valuable information about where your farm is and how it's doing over time. So that's all I'm going to talk about. And I'm going to let Robert talk to everybody about how we utilized the Blue Boat and the sonar to try to understand biomass on the farm. Take it away, Robert.
Yeah. So we were able to get the Blue Boat out on the farm one day in the spring. You can go ahead to the next slide. And so, like Larissa was talking about, it's an uncrewed surface vessel, and it can be operated remotely or autonomously. And so while we were out there, we were operating it remotely, just line of sight. But I think one of the advantages of the Blue Boat is that you could pre-plan a course to actually navigate its way out to the farm by itself, do transects on the farm based on like the locations of those ocean gear buoys, and basically allow it to come back all on its own. But it's a great platform for all sorts of different sensors. It's got that 33 pound payload, and we've equipped it with sonar and multi-beam. Next slide. So yeah, we have the Cerulean OmniScan side scan on either side of the Blue Boat, and that has a 150-meter range. And then the GPS and the heading of the Blue Boat ties into the waterfall side scan and creates an actual map mosaic of whatever you're looking at. We also have it equipped with the Surveyor 240 multi-beam, also from Cerulean. And that also has a 50 to 100-meter depth range and an 80-degree beam width, and is able to compensate for pitch and roll, but ultimately creates a point cloud data set of typically the bottom of what you're looking at. So we were a little bit outside of the range depth-wise, so we didn't get a full sense with the multi-beam. Next slide. So Cerulean has this sonar view software that you can use to operate the sonar equipment and view the imaging after the fact. And that can run on an app itself on your computer, can actually run in a browser on the web, or run on the Raspberry Pi on the Blue Boat itself. And here you can just see a transect back and forth of the long line. Next slide. So to get a little bit more analytical in these sonar images, I imported the data into ReefMaster and adjusted basically the colors and visualization so we can see it a little bit better. But this is the whole transect of the long line, and you can start to see some of the equipment on there. Next slide. So here is the left side of that. You can see the mooring line there on the left and the 10-meter depth control line, and then also these attachment nodes and weight points along the line. Next slide. Yep. Same thing. You can. This is the middle of the line. You can see those attachment nodes, and then the current profiler popping up in those darker red spots. Next slide. Um, Yeah, same situation on this end of the line. But then in that box there, you can see what is actually bubbles from the wake of the previous transect from the the Blue Boat turning around. Uh, I think that was the first time I really noticed that because the like out on the offshore site, realizing what that was. I had seen it a little bit for some inshore surveys, but it's something to be aware of is what else is going on out there. Next slide. Um, so here you can see to some degree the difference in depth of the long line itself, the 10 meters on either side and the 2 meters in the middle. Next slide. And here is where I measured basically tried to get a measure of the biomass on the long line so it could be paired with Adam's actual biomass sampling. So this is on either end of the line at that 10-meter depth. And the return on the sonar measured about 1.1 meters to 1.5 meters from the line itself. Next slide. Yeah. And then here in the middle, you can already see that there's more biomass. So this is in the middle at the 2-meter depth, and we got a sonar return of about 2.3 meters. Uh, yeah. So we're hoping to continue to get measurements like that and actually build a model that we would be able to correlate the actual return of the sonar images with the measured biomass. But we'll have to get out on more farms to do that. But then we now have some images of some of the inshore farm sites of our kelp and a couple nearby farms. So this is the inshore site using a different gear setup. You can see the 5 long lines in the bridle. And this was, I think, earlier in the year, so there was limited kelp growth here, so you don't really see much. Next slide. And so this is another inshore kelp farm that's using single long lines in parallel. And this is just before they harvested. I think it was a week before they harvested it. But in that top image, you can see the 2 long lines, and there's areas with kelp and without kelp. And then on that bottom image, you can actually see 3 long lines conducted on 2 transects. So you can see the GPS basically mapping to create this mosaic map from the Blue Boat and sonar combined. Next slide. And here's our scallop farm. And you can see the hanging lantern nets off the long line. Yeah. Next slide. And then lastly, we have a mussel farm down the river. So it's a raft with the hanging bags, and you can see the overall gear setup, but then to some degree you can look down the rows of the bags inside the raft. And again, on the top side of this image, you can see the wake and the bubbles from a previous Blue Boat transect. Yep. And yeah, that's all that we really have for the sonar images. We're hoping to get more and expand what we can do with the Blue Boat, and hopefully build that model. But there's all sorts of different applications for the Blue Boat and the ROV and the sonar in aquaculture and ecology as well. Yeah.
Great. Thank you guys so much for that presentation. It was incredibly enlightening. You guys are doing incredible work. I recently visited the Darling Marine Center this summer, and it was incredible. It was an incredible experience, incredible place. So it's really interesting hearing all about the research you guys do and how Blue Robotics is involved in that. So it's time for questions. If anyone has a question, feel free to type it in the chat, and I will be happy to read those aloud. If I need you to expand on your question, I might ask you to unmute so you can elaborate. But while we're waiting for some questions, I have one for all three of you, if you each could give an answer. Do you guys like eating seaweed? And if so, is there a favorite seaweed product that you guys enjoy eating the most? Because I had no idea so many seaweed products were out there. When I visited Maine, we had like a seaweed relish that was so cool. It was very yummy. And there's like kelp tacos. So I don't know if you guys have a favorite seaweed product or if you just are like, yeah, I'm not a seaweed person, but I enjoy working with it.
Should I jump in first? I feel
Yeah.
like I've tried seaweed in a lot of different iterations and have even tried pickling some. It's kind of popular to like cut the bull kelp really thin and then pickle it here up on Vancouver Island. But the most like innovative and interesting seaweed snack I've tried is actually from the Abrolhos Islands in Western Australia. And they're like candies for people. I think it's like mostly for people who don't eat sugar or are diabetic. And they're called Neptune's weed. And they're like, yeah, really tasty little jube like things that are actually made out of seaweed.
That is so cool. I had no idea. Thank you. Robert, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I definitely have seaweed now and then. But I think my favorite has been some cheddar and kelp scones that some of the kitchen staff at the Darling Center have made.
That sounds so good. Oh my gosh. I always think of scones like being a sweet kind of entity, but I forget that they can also be savory. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Adam?
Yeah, I try to walk the walk. I'm an equal opportunity seaweed consumer, so I haven't really met a product or a species that I didn't enjoy eating. But if I had to call one out, I think, and it's sacrilege because it's not a main company, but this company Barnacle out in the West Coast where Larissa is, they make a hot sauce called Bull Whip that I could drink. It's so good. I crave it all the time. So it's
Incredible.
my free plug for that product.
Yeah, I love like learning about new seaweed products because there's so much out there that it's just so cool. So that's why I was like, "Ugh, I need to ask, like, what are some new seaweed products or things we could make with seaweed?" And that was great. So now we have some questions in the chat. So I'm gonna go ahead and ask those for you guys. So the first one we have is how long before the Blue Boat runs out of battery?
So it totally depends on how many batteries that you have equipped. It can take up to, I believe, 8 batteries. But then also how fast are you trying to move for your mission? We've been using 2 batteries, and that's more than enough for half a day to a day's worth of surveys. So I think you could actually have several day long endurance mission with that 8 set of batteries.
Awesome. Okay. Sorry. Um, Great. Our next question is, did any of the gear break? How far did it move? Any issues from passing vessels that you are aware of?
Yeah, nothing broke. It did its job and stayed together. I think one of the nice things about using the kind of anchoring system that we use is that if it does lose purchase, you're still sort of dragging an embedment anchor around on the bottom, so it will probably reset itself. What shape it resets itself in remains to be seen. So what happened in this case is that the farm pushed to the west and the anchors sort of got pulled in. So instead of it being a straight line, it was more of a horseshoe. But being a single long line, it didn't create too many problems for us. I wouldn't have wanted to leave it in that condition without fixing the way that it was set up. I don't know of any issues from passing vessels that we were aware of. We worked pretty closely with the fishermen on the island and the fishing community out there because Monhegan has a lobster fishery that is opposite of the rest of the state. So winter is their fishing time. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't in anybody's way. So we took great pains in siting the site appropriately.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Our next question is from Lauren. She says, this is very exciting. Were the images of the mussel farms obtained with the side scan or the multi-beam? Also, in Reefmaster, the images with the white background, was this the side scan, and what are the different colors representing? Thank you.
So everything that I shared was the side scan. So yeah, for the mussel farm and the kelp farm surveys, and for Reefmaster, the darker like red and yellows were the stronger returns on the sonar, whereas the lighter colors were weaker. So like most of the kelp was the lighter color, while the actual hardware on the long line were the red colors. And it was just I switched up the colors just to better visualize what we're looking at rather than just that the green background of the sonar view. Yeah.
Awesome. That was the last of the questions in the chat. I'm gonna give everyone like one more minute if they have any questions. But in the meantime, I am gonna plug that the Aquaculture Information Exchange also has a LinkedIn. So feel free to look up Aquaculture Information Exchange on LinkedIn and be sure to connect there because that's another way to get information on like the happenings. And then also, if we don't have any other questions and we're going to be wrapping up, I wanted to plug the AIE webinars group. Oh, do we have another question? Oh, more questions are coming in. But I'm gonna plug the AIE webinars group because after this webinar, if anyone else has any questions or if you think of something later and you want to ask any of our presenters, I will put a link there and we can continue the conversation on the AIE. So I'm going to link that. And then I'll read out our next question. Could you please tell us about your institute? I am assuming the Aquaculture Research Institute, which I'm personally curious about as well.
Sure. What do we want to know?
If you could just like give an overview about how it's interacted with like its interaction with the University of Maine, the type of research that you guys do, if it's just kelp, if it like what type of like broad spectrum of research that you guys do, projects that you work on, that sort of thing.
Sure. Well, I just dropped a link in the chat that should get you to our website. So the academia can be confusing. So the Aquaculture Research Institute is a part of the University of Maine. So we are UMaine employees. We're part of the university. The goal is to, like I said, sort of try to bring people together from disparate walks of science to address common problems within aquaculture. Our current research space spans from seaweed and bivalves through finfish. We do a lot of finfish research specifically on our main campus, centered around like health and disease and pathology and feed formulations. We work a lot in bivalves. We have an oyster breeding program that we run out of the Darling Center in partnership with the USDA. We're again sort of building the bones of an analogous breeding style program for sugar kelp here with the Gametified Biobank. We have a diversified multi-species research farm right here in the Cove at the Darling Center as well, which I think Bailey, hopefully you got to see when you were here. But that's a really cool space. We are able to grow everything there from softshell clams to seaweed to urchins to scallops and mussels and oysters. And in fact, we have all of them there in the same space, which is really great. So the ability to move animals from a hatchery setting straight into a trial setting in the field within 100 yards from each other is really, really cool. It's something I don't take for granted at all. So that's, it's a great place to be. I think we're doing really great work. And yeah, reach out to us.
Great, thank you. And I'm gonna say this is gonna be our last question, and then I'm gonna wrap everything up. So I want to ask if there's gonna be a report published, but I believe you guys had a slide with a bunch of like QR codes. I don't know if that's like what they're referencing potentially, with like a couple of papers.
Yeah, those were all of our techno-economic analyses that are already published. I can click back to that slide if my computer will let me. So these studies have already come out. If they're talking about the work that we've done at this offshore site, there will be a paper. We're working on the manuscript right now. So hopefully that'll come out sometime soon. But if they have any more questions about any more questions about it, they're happy to chat more. I think I think the opportunities in using these kind of technologies are really important for maybe not even just offshore aquaculture, but aquaculture in general. So if you imagine, instead of a single seaweed longline, you have 10 acres with 20 single long lines that are fairly close together. If you properly, say, outfit each of those lines with a GPS buoy and you're periodically going out and driving a blue boat around with some sonar, you can get some really important insights beyond just how does the kelp look, right? So I think there's an opportunity to build sort of a programmatic backend where, oh, buoy 2 is on the wrong side of buoy 3, which means lines 1 and 2 are crossed at this point. And cross lines in seaweed farming is really bad because then you're abrading seaweed off and you're losing profit, right? So to be able to then targetedly go out on the site and say, I know where my entanglement is. I just have to go right to this spot and fix it rather than trying to look at a million buoys in a plane and figure out where your cross lines are. So like, that's just an example of, thinking, extrapolating from the things we've learned thus far and thinking about them at scale and what sort of potential use cases could be. And I think there are many.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for that. And we have one more quick question. Is the offshore kelp farm in state waters or federal?
State waters.
Great.
Thanks, Monhegan.
Fair enough. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. I'm going to wrap it up there. Like I said, if you guys have any other questions to ask our presenters, you can join the AIE webinars group and ask them there. Otherwise, thank you so much to Larissa, Adam, and Robert for presenting today. It was incredibly enlightening. Thank you guys all for your time and efforts putting together this presentation. Remember to subscribe to the AIE YouTube channel as well, so to be able to see this webinar and share it with others. And be a part of the Aquaculture Information Exchange in general, so register for that as well if you're not already. And yeah, with that, I hope everyone has a lovely rest of their day, and we will see you all at the next webinar.